matchup here. Welcome back to YouTube. This is kind of a Faerie analysis on some deeper level analysis going on. I go through these games and kind of talk about more of my thought process of how games go, more in-depth thought process happening. So anyway, I like to share that and kind of describe some things to people. Let me turn down that. Okay, it's too loud. So anyway, we see a pretty good hand here from right away. So we're pretty happy with this. We got snare on one, we got 2 counterspell and a threat. So and the rest land. So we're cool here. Alright, so we see Aether Vial and we see our Ghost Quarter. So we immediately think Death and Taxes. Death and Taxes is not getting played a whole lot around town anymore. It is definitely not meta, and for a good reason. The meta hasn't stalled, so that's when Death and Taxes is the best when metas stall. So we have Arbiter. He charges Arbor. We then have Spell Snare. So we have the Vial on one. We then just hold up Counterspell. We're obviously going to counter his Archon of Myria. So nothing crazy yet. Vial on 2. He then keeps Vial on 2. So we're lucky that he doesn't have another 2-drop in his hand. So we're very lucky on here. He then plays Might with Toxic 1 and then gives choose the color. Another target creature you control gains Toxic 1 and Hexproof from that color until the end of turn. It can't be blocked by creatures of that color this turn. So basically, it's pretty much protection. So he plays that. He then triggers Vial. So we don't have too much going on here. He plays a Strict Proctor, which basically it causes triggered abilities to cost 2. So it doesn't really affect our deck too much. So we then play March. And again, this card's in here just to... it's very similar to Fairy Fencing. It's a way to deal with Planeswalkers effectively, but it's also going to allow us to have sustain in the matchup because we are playing a control style Faeries in this particular version of the deck. So we're slower and the games might go longer and Bitter Blossom might kill us more often, so that's why we play this. So, alright. He Vials for 2. We can't do anything. He plays Hushbringer, a nice little Faerie here. And basically EBTs or ETBs and Dying Triggers don't trigger anymore. So, you know, he's playing a little Faerie action too. We're not going to do anything here. Or he then plays a Anthem for Honor the Pure, which is good. So he's mono white beats basically with a Death and Taxes shell. So we then counter that. We then play land, play Sleep Curse Faerie. He then starts ghost courting our lands away and just trying to get our basics out basically. I don't grab a swamp because if he ghost quarters that swamp, then I have to go fetch and do life to shock myself to do it. So I'm just trying to conserve some stuff. I'm also conserving my black mana because it's going to be very precious this game. So we untap, take a stun counter off, he swings. We just take. He then vials in another Proctor. We don't really care about this too much. We care about the Hushbringer more than this. This is against other decks that he's trying to hate out. Yep. We then take another stun counter off there. We then play another Sleep Curse Faerie. Now, one thing I could do is I could untap here and swing. I choose not to. So Honor to the Pure. Even though I knew I couldn't. I didn't tap or untap because of that. So I wanted to keep this mana going, because as long as he has this Ghost Quarter, I can't fetch for black mana because he'll immediately kill it. And granted, I can just like I could go get Watery Grave. He would then blow it up, and I'd go get my basic Swamp. But then we start playing into this game of, am I going to have black mana or not? And I would rather have black mana when I need it the most, rather than any other time. So, and I'd much rather him like stall out and get kind of anxious to Ghost Quarter like this, the Aurora or the Riptide Laboratory, to get my other black source of mana. You know, I don't want to just grab my Swamp or whatever, you know, my black mana like this and just keep, because I only have so many sources, you know, that I can fetchable black sources. We're not playing that many, so anyway, he preemptively concedes, and rightfully so, more than likely. When decks get like this and playing Vial decks and you're down to no cards in hand, you're going to be hurting. So, and we basically in 2 turns we have a 6 power on the board it's doing, plus this coming down in the turn. So we're definitely ahead, and his concession is correct. So another thing for deck building purposes. So he's obviously playing Death and Taxes, which is fine. But in his Vial deck, he's playing more of Honor to the Pure. So he's going for some synergies that don't necessarily go with each other very well. So I'm sure he's playing some kind of instant and sorcery speeds as well. But the Honor to the Pure really goes against the Vial nature of his deck. So the question is should he be playing like more of a reactionary creature that he could Vial in over the Anthem effect here? I would suggest that he cut the Anthem effects and go for a more creature archetype. Play 30 creatures, 35 creatures almost. Really throw this Vial into the mix and make the Vial deck a Vial deck. You get into these positions where you just draw so many of these Anthems, and yeah, those Anthems double your output for attacking. But as you see here, if I'm loaded with counter magic or just ways to work around it, or if I had a bunch of removal in my hand, just keep his board clear, this Honor to the Pure doesn't do anything, you know. So, you know, things like Flicker Wisp, things like Skyclave, you know, things like that. So anyway, game 2, just food for thought. When you're constructing a Vial deck and where you want it to go, it's not a bad build. It's not horrible that you can do it. It's just you have 2 conflicting kind of theory craftings going on, and they sometimes they look really, on paper it looks good. Oh yeah, I'll draw this in the perfect time and I'll do this, and then when it comes out and you start to play spells turn after turn after turn, you find that you just have nothing in your hand worth good, like that's doing good. So that's why I think his deck is failing. So we get this deck, or get this hand here for game 2. 4 lands, got double blue, can cast everything I need. This black source and this black source will be very good, very useful here. So we grab a black source out the gate, knowing we have this in the back burner. So he then plays Spirit of Labyrinth, which is a 3/1 beater. So, and he's stopping like card draw basically out of this. It's a cool little card. So it's relevant in the right meta. So especially if he was playing a lot of Murktide in a Murktide meta. Yeah, Murktide has since like not been played as much, but. And then he plays Archon Emeria. And we counter that, obviously, for obvious reasons, because that card isn't fun to play against. So we then Dark Slick Sword and pass. And we're taking a bunch of damage here. We then Sprite, which is the best thing about Sleepy, is that I don't have to worry about him removing the Sleep Curse Fairy after this. He then honors the Pure. See, and this is the other part, is he's antheming after he attacks, you know, and so we're, you know, his opportunity to do more damage is there. Like if this was a creature, I don't want to say an arbiter, but if this was a creature, anything, a Thalia, him putting this down now is actually way, you know, Thalia would be much worse for me. Even though I have ways to deal it and I can play around it, Thalia would hurt. So, just saying from my point of view, this Anthem doesn't do a whole lot right now. So we land go. We're basically being the control deck, which isn't surprising because that's what we are. So I'm going to bounce the Anthem, and then we're going to chump with Sprite. So, you know, he then replays on it at the Pure. We then snare it. So he then Mind Sensors. We offer a trade. He can just chump. So we don't get that. We Faerie Fencing. And then the opponent concedes. So we're obviously in control here. Next turn, I'm going to have a Brazen Borrower and a Sleep Curse Fairy. So, and then he doesn't know what's in our hand, so we can also, you know, if he plays something, possibly with haste, we can untap here. But as you can see, we just had answers to everything he had going on. He never got taxes down. He was never able to kind of control us out. Sleep Curse Fairy, his removal setup is probably all creature based, or it's going to be like Path Exile, things like that go with taxes and things, and that's just not good for him to play. He didn't get a Vial down, so he's playing mana. He's trying to play Fair Magic, and all this deck wants to do is us to play a turn behind. And if he doesn't get ahead and we're not playing a turn behind, we're in the driver's seat the whole way and we're not worried about it. So next 2 turns we have 8 power on board. We win in 2 turns or 3 turns. We're not worried about this one. So yeah. So anyway, nice to see a Death and Taxes deck out there still rolling around. Glad to kind of show off Honor the Pure and how you can play around it, and how this Anthem is just not as good as another creature like a Thalia or whatever. So anyway, if you got any questions, comments, drop them in the description of the channel. So anyway, I will see you later, and this is a review. Have a good one.